Well, I hope you're awake and ready for this webinar, Solidarity Economy 101, presented by Cooperate Connecticut in partnership with the New Economy Coalition. We're going to be defining the terms economy, capitalism, um, solidarity, and the solidarity economy today. Um, we'll be highlighting strategies and local examples of different solidarity economy interventions. We'll be offering some recommendations on how you can learn more and get involved. And what we won't be doing today, just to be clear, is that we're not going to have the space to be engaging in group dialogue. We're not going to be providing a deep dive into the history and theory of capitalism and alternative economic systems. If you know me, you know I was a high school ethnic studies teacher, so I would love to do that and could do that all day. And this is not the space for that. Um, we're not going to be brainstorming or strategizing together here. This is, again, intended to be a primer, just to introduce some concepts, and hopefully we'll be talking more about other spaces where some of that brainstorming and strategizing can happen. And we're not going to be offering you a blueprint or a specific action plan, right? You're coming from such different contexts, and so we're not going to be prescribing necessarily how you apply what you learned today. But we hope this will at least get you inspired and give you some ideas. Um, so that's a little bit about expectations for today's session. And let's introduce ourselves. So I'll start. My name is Varun Khattar Sharma. I am a facilitator, a teacher, a writer, curator, based here on occupied land, known today as Hartford, Connecticut. I am a fellow with the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, which is a non-extractive loan and technical assistance provider to co-ops across New England and New York. And I'm based out of Reset, which is a nonprofit that supports social enterprises here in Hartford, Connecticut, where I'm the lead organizer for Cooperate Connecticut, which I'll also talk a little bit more about in a second. A little bit more about me is I come from the immigrant rights movement. So my background is doing youth organizing, specifically in the immigrant rights movement and mutual aid work. And I also, again, as I mentioned, was previously a high school teacher, and am a co-founder, and current director of the People Saturday School, which is a grassroots center for training, education, and healing for activists and organizers working towards abolition. And yeah, and I'm glad to be doing this work alongside Emilie and Julian, who Julian and I were lived in the same dorm freshman year of college. Fun fact. So this is a long time coming, and I'll pass it to Emilie first to introduce herself. Yeah.
Thanks, Varun. Yeah, my name's Emilie Miyauchi. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a peer educator with the Cooperative Economics Alliance of New York City, and was also like part of the group that got that organization established. My background is mostly, well, it's in like so many things, but I kind of came into this work through farming, through developing community food systems, establishing community gardens in Baltimore and in New York City. And, just kind of like running into this issue of like working in unincorporated groups that were like trying to move money and food and material things to people and needing bank accounts and needing to like work with banks that would actually recognize us, and started talking to community development credit unions and started getting involved with like other people from all these different kind of like siloed veins of solidarity economy in New York City. And we saw a need for like an umbrella organization like the Cooperative Economics Alliance of New York City is. And yeah, and that's how I was kind of introduced to the framework of solidarity economy. Like I've been doing all this other stuff and then like realized that people were working on all of these different elements and trying to knit them together. And I'll pass it to Julian.
Hey y'all, Julian, I use he, their pronouns. Originally from the Hartford area and currently living in Atlanta. Um, I work at the New Economy Coalition and I also organize with Endstate Atlanta and the Free Atlanta Abolition Movement, which is a Black run bail fund in the city of Atlanta. Um, yeah, I kind of came into this work through more of like an abolitionist, Black radical perspective. Um, was doing lots of mutual aid and training work and kind of stumbled upon this idea of the solidarity economy, maybe much like some of y'all will today, and realized that this is some of the ways that our communities have been living in such a long time, but also, realizing how it's deeply connected to liberation movements and seeing that as a really important framing. So, so yeah, just really excited to be here with y'all today. Um, Guess I could say a little bit more about NEC really quickly. The New Economy Coalition is a network of over 200 organizations across the country representing the solidarity economy movement in the United States. And so we organize and support members in being more powerful and united against capitalism and supporting a transition of our economic system away from capitalism into a solidarity economy. So that's a little bit about what we do. We provide infrastructure, training, support, granting, all that stuff. So yeah, happy to be here and thanks for
Thanks, Julian. Um, yeah, it's so sweet to get to work with you both. Um, and yeah, I've learned so much from the two of you. So it's an honor to be teaching alongside you. Um, I want to say a little bit about Cooperate Connecticut. We're proud to officially now be members of the New Economy Coalition and have been, um, yeah, I've been showing up in any NEC space that, that they'll let me in for the past couple of years as I've been on my learning journey. And so but I want to say a little bit about what we're doing here in Connecticut. So Cooperate Connecticut is a membership-based network catalyzing cooperative ownership and power. So we bring co-ops and supporters together across the state to grow our local cooperative ecosystem. And we do that through increasing access to information, education, like webinars like we're doing today, training, technical and material support, and networking and collaboration. We were founded just 2 years ago, so we're still very much early in our development. We're just learning to walk. We're getting our first teeth, um, eating solid food. But yeah, this is yeah, I'm excited to just in just the last couple of years to see how our co-op and our solidarity economy movement has been growing here in Connecticut, and that's really what we're here to do, is not just to develop co-ops for the sake of developing co-ops, but to really facilitate cooperation among co-ops in order to, as one strategy towards building the solidarity economy. And if you're like, what does that mean? You're in the right place. So um, I with that, I think I'm going to pass it to you, Emilie, to dive into thinking about what is an economy.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Varun. Yeah, so we're taking the approach here of not just like telling you what solidarity economy is, but like breaking it apart a little bit. So first we're gonna kind of explore like what is economy? What is solidarity? Um, so, what is an economy? And, like here, you might have like lots of different ideas. It might feel very abstract. Like, when we start to like really think about the economy, which is something that gets talked about all the time, analyzed, um, you know, treated very carefully, like something that everyone's kind of navigating around. It might feel something like a topic that only like an expert class is really able to analyze. And there are a lot of power relationships around it, right? Like we might feel like we're kind of like constantly navigating around just like the forces of the economy and like making a lot of decisions about our lives. based on what we hear about the economy. Um, and we also can like define it in much more basic ways. There's this really wonderful definition from movement generation. Um, and yeah, very good. So the movement generation offers this definition of the economy, that it's how we organize relationships to care for each other, for our home and each other. And so, like there are a couple of different things I just want to point out here. Like one is that it's like highly relational. So you can't kind of like insulate yourself and be like, or become disentangled from the economy. Like it's just kind of like something we need to grapple with. Um, and like there's like a big ethos of care within this. Like so, we're talking about the ways that we are caring for each other and for our homes. And we might want to expand this idea of home. Um, so this can be very literal, right? Like it can be the ways that you bring goods into your home, how you pay your rent, how you're able to just kind of like sustain your own livelihood. But we can also get more expansive about it. And when I consider for myself, like my own sense of home, it kind of goes in all dimensions, um, both to the past, to the future, and also kind of like to the micro and the macro. And so, my home for me has like a very internal sense of my own body, how I'm able to care for my own body, how I'm able to receive care, make sure that my health allows me to kind of be in the world, being caring relationships with other people, um, as well as thinking of the kind of like links from the past that I'm continuing to grapple with as I navigate society and economy and work and all of these things, as well as like the kind of like future that I'm creating for other people in the ways that I relationally organize. Um, and so, like there are also for me like lots of links internationally. My family's a family of immigrants. So um, like again, it's kind of just like noting all of these ways that we are entangled in this world and that our how we organize relationships has all these ripple effects. And so again, like we could take this very literally, or we could be much more expansive about it. Um, and I think a lot of folks have different takes about it. And I would offer Julian the stage for you to let us know how you relate to economy and
Yeah,
or to hope.
yeah, appreciate that question. When I think about home, I just think about like connection. I think of like a deep sense of like responsibility to something, like the places I feel are home or feel places I feel like I'm tending to, like I'm stewarding. And also that like interdependence. So are places that I am both caring for and I'm like getting care from. Those are the places that feel like home to me. Um, in some cases, those are people, and sometimes, that's like the world. Also have kind of as a diasporan, like have connections to Jamaica and Anguilla and Costa Rica and other places as well. So um, home has always felt complicated and expansive for me. Um, and also, yeah, definitely included natural elements. Um, because like, what would it mean for this place to be home and not to include, plant life that's caring for us, animal life that we come from and we're connected to. So yeah, it just like includes so much for me when I really get to thinking about it. So yeah, my understanding of the economy is like, oh yeah, like we need to be in relationships of care around all of those things. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. Um, yeah, so we're seeing like all of these relationships, they're deeply related to how we show up personally in the world, but also related to kind of, um, what's affecting us upstream, and what our effects are downstream. And, like this is just like a very, I think, like fundamental framework we need to bring in so that we're also starting to build in a non-extractive worldview of the economy. Um, and we've been saying the economy, but really there are very diverse ways that people engage in economy. Um, and so this is like a really incredible like illustration of that. So we're seeing this iceberg and a water line. And what's above the water line, we might consider to be the most like visible forms of economic relationships, things that like a lot of people can relate to, and that are formally recognized. So these are things like wage labor, so exchanging your time for wages. Commodity markets, so the ways that goods are exchanged within a marketplace, and capitalist enterprise. So things that are very normalized within our economic frameworks. However, and like we all might be engaging in all of these things, right? Like unless you have like very special circumstances that you've created for yourself, we do need to have jobs that pay us so that we can pay for, um, you know, all the goods and services we need to support our lives. However, if you're looking below the waterline at things that are less recognized, things that might be informal or invisibilized, we're probably also engaging in a whole lot of these other activities too that we might not even have internalized as ways that we're engaging in the economy. And some of these are things that are just kind of like lesser known forms. So, like part of our wage labor might be as a worker in a cooperative, which is really, in the US context, like not very clear, not very known. But it also might just be like the ways that you barter with your neighbor, or like having a friend come over and, offer some childcare for you, when you might cook them dinner. Like there are all these kind of ways that we engage with each other to support each other's lives, to support each other's time, to support our ability to show up in different spaces, um, that are also part of what's below the waterline here. And that, um, like show us that like we actually engage in like all these pluralistic ways within these kinds of relationships of care and exchange. So this is just to kind of like give us like a little bit of like expansion, a little bit of breathing room, when we think about the economy, and it's not just kind of like what the Dow Jones says. Um, and I'll pass it to Varun also, who will help us to kind of make a little bit more sense of economy and how to analyze it.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I don't know this Dow Jones. I don't know her. but yeah, as Emily said, we do all participate in the economy, and again, like we're gonna really be, sometimes falling back into using the phrase the economy, right? But again, like one of the things we offer is this idea of economies, right? That there is actually no one economy. Economies are just different systems for organizing how we care for each other in our home. Um, so I'm gonna just before diving into what is capitalism, I want to talk a little bit about how we can compare and contrast different economies. Um, and I'm going to use these four questions from this course, Economics for Emancipation, that some of us have been through, and also if you're in Connecticut, you may have the opportunity to go through just in a couple weeks. Um, and we're looking so Economics for Emancipation, this course that comes out of the Center for Economic Democracy and the Center for Popular Economics, um, offers these questions of ownership. Who owns things? So when thinking about an economy, who owns things? Allocation, how are things shared? Governance, who decides? Or I said how decides, but really who, that's a typo. Who decides? And division of labor, who does the grunt work? So yeah, and looking at different economic systems, whether you're talking about capitalism, socialism, and again, as I'll get into, like, actually there are many kinds of capitalism and many kinds of socialism. It's important to have these questions in mind, and to determine also, like, how do we want to participate in ownership? How do we want what kind of systems for allocation do we want to be a part of? What kind of decision make like how do we want to share power and make decisions together? And how do we want to decide who does the grunt work, right? Or share that labor of some of those less desirable or more sort of unsafe or sort of physically or mentally demanding tasks that are required to care for each other and for our homes. So um, I'm just, yeah, offer those four questions and thinking about different economies. And then I want to add a fifth question from I work with Neonu and her mentor, Dr. Daria Funches. And I know Leonie's here, so shout out to you, Leonie. You know what I'm about to say, but I think it's important to not just think about the right, like what's happening out in what we can see visibly, but it's also important to look at the root level when we're thinking about an economy. What are the core beliefs and assumptions? What are those values? What are the worldviews that are underneath what we see? That can tell us a lot about an economy as well. And we can use this framework, right, to think about ourselves, like what is underneath decisions we make every day. But also, I think when we think about systems, it's important to not just focus on, again, the kind of not just focus on the kind of how materials are exchanged, or goods and services are exchanged, but actually what is underneath it. What do we hold as sacred, right? Do we believe that all life is sacred?
Fine to
Do,
go over your results from yesterday.
um, Thanks for muting yourself, y'all. All good. So yeah, I think some of these questions around thinking about the root level is, yeah, like, does this economy consider all life sacred? Does this economy believe that we belong to the earth, or does the earth belong to us? Right, that's a pretty fundamental core belief. And so what kind of economy you build upon that belief is going to look very different depending on how you answer that question. Do we believe people have a fundamental right to housing, to healthcare, right, to education? I mean, I think those, where we see in our world today that there are some real differences in people's fundamental core beliefs and assumptions. And those differences are showing up in the kind of policies and practices that we see within businesses, within governments. But that, at the end of the day, I think we have to think back to the root level and what are we actually, what is it that we hold most sacred, or what is the, how do we want to view the world and view each other in our home? So thanks for offering that question in the chat, Emilie. Yeah, are we in relationships of communion or domination? Because I think it's easy, again, to get caught up in some of the technical aspects of different kinds of economies, capitalism, socialism, right? But I think ultimately that is the question, right? What is our relationship to, yeah, is it communion, or to each other? Is it based on domination or communion? I'm going to talk, but now let's get into what is capitalism actually, which is just one economic system, but in arguably is, in the U.S. and globally today, is the most dominant or visible and formally recognized economic system. And so we often talk about capitalism, right? You'll often hear people talk about the failures of capitalism, especially in leftist organizing spaces, right? We'll talk about living under late stage capitalism, but often we're not defining what that means. Like, what does capitalism mean? And I think it's important to be very specific with our language. And so, because if we're not specific in defining capitalism, or we can run the risk of just thinking focusing on reforming it versus considering what I think the solidarity economy offers, which is a vision of a world beyond capitalism, right? A vision of a world that's, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but like both pre and post capitalism. But yeah, but let's talk about what this current system we in looks like, and how are those relationships with organized. So some of the five tenets, and I'm gonna go real quick through this. And again, if you want to go deeper, I encourage you to check out Economics for Emancipation. But capitalism, right? There's five primary tenets of capitalism. So private ownership over the means of production. So basically, what that means is the things you need to produce stuff are owned by capitalists, right? Are owned by privately by individuals or corporations, right? And those things that you need, right, could include land, factories, equipment, other kind of inputs to produce your phone, to produce the kind of the clothes you wear, to produce housing. Those things are privately owned. We have wage labor under capitalism. So workers do not own the means of production. They work for a wage that is worth less than the value they produce, which then creates profit for those capitalists that own the means of production, right? And so that's where inevitable class struggle exists in capitalism. So in capitalism, you have these two classes, right? The capitalist class and the worker class, working class, that are in a constant struggle with each other. Because in order for capitalists to profit, there has to be those profit requires the exploitation of those workers that are earning wages. I'm going to skip to number 5 now, profit maximization. So as a system, capitalism prioritizes profit above all, right? Again, which often requires the exploitation of workers and the earth and extraction from the earth. Number 3, commodity production. So goods are produced for sale rather than based on what is needed. So we'll because of that, often things that are needed, the needs are often not met, right? So things that we produce things based on what will sell, right? And what will make the capitalist the most amount of money. And then market exchange. So things are bought and sold on the market. And so as opposed to direct, like I'm cooking food for my neighbor directly, which again, in other economies, like with other ways of exchanging food, right? In capitalism, if I want food, I go to the market to buy food. And so these slides will definitely be available to you all for reference later. Yeah, thanks for that question. So just to again reiterate, so those are the 5 tenets of capitalism according to the Center for Popular Economics, and I think it's important to note that one characteristic alone does not make an economy capitalist. So it requires, to be a capitalist, an economy has to have all 5 of those tenets. Right? Markets predate capitalism. So there are markets outside of capitalism. There's commodity production. People produce things for sale, not just based on need, outside of capitalism, right? But these 5 things have to exist in order for us to really consider an economy capitalist. And again, what we know to be true is that capitalism often has a tendency to concentrate wealth and power, to celebrate the pursuit of self-interest as a social virtue, to create crisis, to create economic and kind of ecological crises, and to really just promote endless growth, right? Which has real consequences. So just quickly, don't want to, again, like I said, there's so much more we could dive into, but I'm trying to, we're trying to give you kind of broad strokes, just so you can, at least at the very basic level, talk about these things in a more informed way. And so there's, again, like I mentioned earlier, there's multiple kinds of economies and there's multiple kinds of capitalism. So the 3, we can think about these 3 different types of capitalism: social democracy, New Deal capitalism, and neoliberalism, as three of perhaps many types of capitalism, right? So on this chart, you'll see on the left, social democracy is characterized by a more active, a bigger government, more regulations, more redistribution. So that's like what we see in Scandinavian countries, right? In Finland and Norway. In today in the U.S. and in most countries, we have, as a result of U.S. foreign policy, we have neoliberalism, right? Which is small government, which is this concept of a free market, which is kind of not, is kind of a misnomer, right? Is rhetoric that is used to defend neoliberalism, when in fact, in order for neoliberalism to exist, the government does intervene and manipulate the market in a lot of ways. So we see corporate welfare, we see government investment in the military-industrial complex, right? So it's not that the government isn't intervening; it's that it's intervening to defend particular groups' interests over other groups, controlling the value of currencies, exactly. And then in between, you have New Deal capitalism, which is what emerged in the U.S. Following the Great Depression, where capitalism in some ways was an attempt to save capitalism, actually, right? Capitalists, right? So FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, right, stole many of the ideas of New Deal capitalism from socialists and communists, because there was a crisis, and clearly the capitalism itself wasn't meeting the needs of the people. And so they implemented these kind of guardrails in response to organizing on the left, right? In response to labor organizing, community organizing, populist organizing, which again led to more regulations, more redistribution of resources, but unfortunately, breaking up of monopolies, and in some ways, right, that existed for only about 4 decades before, but kind of immediately you saw capitalist undermining and kind of stripping down that system in order to get us to what we have today, which is neoliberalism. So that's just a primer on what is capitalism, right? And I'm going to pass it. I think I'm passing it to you, Julian, to talk a little bit about solidarity.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Before we get into what the solidarity economy is and what that movement is, it's important to first ground in solidarity, which was the basis for this economic model, right? So kind of just thinking about what do we actually mean by solidarity? One of the examples that I think about most in the context of American history is a lot of the collaboration between Native American and like enslaved Africans to fight for their liberation from settler colonialists who are also driving a lot of land theft and enslavement of people, right? So it's like a historical example, but there are many present day examples as well of people kind of having shared struggles against systems that are oppressing them. Yeah, so I think that solidarity is about recognizing the ways that our struggles are intertwined, which we hear a lot. But that doesn't, just because that phrase is popular, doesn't mean that people are always acting and making decisions in that knowledge, right? So solidarity is recognizing that our fights are more about us showing up for each other, not treating people like they're sacrificial, showing up to make sure that if there's oppression anywhere in the world, then it can affect all of us. So we need to be resisting all of that. So yeah, I invite y'all in the chat to kind of talk about what are some expressions of solidarity to you? What does it look like to actually show up in solidarity? Solidarity can happen at the individual level and the collective level. So it has to do with our individual choices as well as some of the ways our groups and communities function in relation to each other. And that's kind of an idea that grounds or is the basis for the solidarity economy. So this graphic here, it says nothing about us without us is for us, right? So this is the idea that solidarity is about a collective, like it's about collectivism, and it's not possible for something to be about solidarity, but people are making decisions about what happens to other people, right? So yeah, we're going to go into this principle of solidarity a little bit more as we talk about the solidarity economy movement, but definitely drop examples in the chat of what solidarity means to you. So what is the solidarity economy? The solidarity economy is a global movement, and it's an organizing framework. And it's also a set of principles and practices for putting people in the planet over profit, right? We talked a little bit about how under capitalism, one of the main motivations, Varun was talking about the assumptions and beliefs that undergird an economic model. And under capitalism, one of those beliefs is that like profit is a huge motivator. Consolidation and consumption are huge motivators. Under the solidarity economy, we're talking about meeting people's needs as the primary motivator, right? So the solidarity economy provides real alternatives to capitalism, where communities govern themselves through participatory democracy. They use cooperatives and public ownership and a culture of solidarity and respect for others. One of the other things that's really important about the solidarity economy movement is that it is indeed a global movement, right? So these are not alternatives to capitalism, so we can have more fun. Although yes, we love fun, we love joy, and many of the solidarity economy models do bring that about. But it's also specifically for setting people up and sustaining people in their resistance, in their participation and resistance struggles. So some of these economic models that are detached from liberation movements, I would personally say that may or may not be the solidarity economy movement. You know what I mean? So it's really important. I think we can keep going probably. Yeah, so like we were saying, the solidarity economy movement um, actively subverts and counters many aspects of capitalism that most folks have become accustomed to in some ways. So where there is the police state, the solidarity economy articulates a transformative justice where people have consolidated monopolies of control. Instead, we have community control, where you might be used to having a boss. We're talking about worker ownership. So just like throughout a lot of these models, right, it's putting the hands back. I mean, putting the power back into the hands of the people to share that power and to exercise that power collectively. Yeah, and Varun actually mentioned earlier about how the solidarity economy is both a pre and post-capitalist understanding of the world, right? So before capitalism, there was lots of collective ownership. There were no bosses in the same way that we understand them today. There was much more care for meeting people's needs. And that's the world that we intend to bring about through the solidarity economy movement. So I won't get into everything here, but just understanding how the solidarity economy articulates a post-capitalist world helps us understand kind of why we're doing all of this in the first place. And the solidarity economy, lastly, includes things from a variety of sectors. So we're talking about creation, production, models for exchange and transfer. We're talking about models for consumption as well, and surplus allocation, right? And then at the center of this, at the core of this, the thing that holds it all together are our values and meeting the direct material needs of people, right? So we're talking about community, energy, education, and so much more, kind of holding all of this together. Right. So solidarity economy is not just about time banks. It's not just about credit unions. It actually spans so many different areas of life and what we're talking about when we say caring for home. And so, yeah, I'm going to pass it to Emilie to talk a little bit about the actual principles and values of the solidarity economy movement.
Thank you so much, Julian. So we see that, like what can be solidarity economy, like all the models and all the practices, they're very, very diverse. If we think back to that diverse economies iceberg, like there's zillions of more things that could sit below that waterline. Um, but we want to ask ourselves, like, are these fundamentally transformative? Like, are they really transforming our social relationships, our economic relationships? Are we actually like effectively like undercutting capitalism, being anti-capitalist? Um, and this offering from the Solidarity Economy Principles Project is really like a way to analyze like the quality of our relationships within this, and if they are um, like if we are really like effectively and strategically using like this kind of measure of like the quality of our relationships and equity and power together to really do transformative work. And so like first we might think about collective care, how we're in relationships of tending to one another, of being accountable to one another, knowing again, like a fundamental kind of belief in the system is entanglement of having a shared future. And so we can't like treat each other terribly or be unaccountable in our actions and still kind of be doing solidarity economy work. And that can be more structured, right? Like the internal democracy of our groups, having clear processes that are transparent, that everyone knows, that people might participate in building is also like a big aspect of solidarity economy projects. So we want to like really be creative about how we relate to one another democratically. Really, not just kind of like producing something better that might be environmentally friendly, but not thinking about like who made decisions about this and how are those made. Um, and to, enable people to kind of participate at that level of like creating their own systems of creating proposals, making decisions. We need education and leadership development. Like we've become like very alienated from the ways that we make choices, that we relate structurally to one another. And so there's a lot of education and leadership development needed for everyone involved. Like it's a continuous process. Um, and like this is tied to a deep belief in liberation culture, since that like everyone's involvement and participation is required for our collective liberation. And having shared resources, shared vision is a really fundamental piece of this. Like, despite the plurality of ways that we can express solidarity economy and all the different creative visions of that, like there still needs to be, at the end of the day, a feeling that we are moving together, that the like the products of our creativity and vision and labor are kind of moving into a collective commons. Like we are recreating the commons through our work. um, and so these are some ways to kind of like make some assessments, right? Like there are like a zillion different ideas of what solidarity economy can be, but like these are some of the kind of like checks on that. Like, are we really doing it? Are we really undercutting the kind of like ideological roots of capitalism? Let's see. And I
Yeah.
think I'm passing the varun.
Yeah. Um, and y'all, my sense of time is I live in my own time zone, so I realize we're a little bit behind, but I will try to be concise here and just saying that, um, yeah, solidarity economy didn't, is not this kind of fringe movement that started yesterday. It emerges from Latin America and Europe. The U.S. is actually pretty late to the game when it comes to organizing around the solidarity economy, arguably. Although, again, versions of the solidarity economy existed even prior to that term becoming popularized, right here in the Americas, within many indigenous, many Black communities, many immigrant communities. This poster, you might have heard this expression, otro mundo es posible, un mundo donde quepan todos los mundos. So another world is possible, a world in which many worlds fit. That expression is sort of popularized around the same time that the solidarity economy kind of started to expand globally. So it emerged in the 1980s, it gained popular in the 1990s, and the International Solidarity Economy Network was launched in Peru in 1997. And then, yeah, this phrase, this kind of iconography was really popularized at the World Social Forum in Brazil in 2001. And the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network was founded only in 2007. And today there's a UN task force on the solidarity economy. Bolivia and Ecuador have the solidarity economy written into their constitutions. There's 12 at least 12 countries have national policies in support of the solidarity economy. So it is deeply rooted, right, in a lot of movements, global movements, and not something that came out of economists in the ivory tower here in the U.S. And I just actually, I might, for the sake of time, skip over some of this. Yeah, because I want to just talk a little bit about what now. So I'm gonna we'll share these slides with you, and some of this information will be provided over email. But again, the solidarity economy, as Julian mentioned, can look like a lot of different things. And so some of those examples include land trusts and housing co-ops, worker co-ops, people's assemblies, mutual aid networks, participatory budgeting, SUSUs, and cooperative finance, and many more interventions that help build towards a solidarity economy. And so with just a couple of minutes left, wonder actually if I can just ask you to just quickly highlight, like, what are some of the projects that you are connected to locally in your communities, Emilie and Julian, that are building towards a solidarity economy, just so we can give people a picture. And then we'll just talk a little bit about where do we go from here. So.
Cool. Yeah. So these images are actually from a program I run called the Green Thumb Leadership Academy, which is for community gardeners in New York City. There are over 500 different community gardens. And you'll see some of these images are they're like old redlining photos. New York City has like over 100 acres of land in community stewardship, specifically in these community gardens, as a result of redlining and of neglect and mismanagement of land, which led to its bankruptcy and the creation of these spaces. And this program is really again, education being such a fundamental thing. We're really, these garden leaders, which is everyone in the garden, are very much in a practice of trying to experiment with self-governance, of trying to really undermine some of the power relationships people come into the space with, and be in different relationships with one another. And so this course really kind of brings people into a place where we can talk about the different ways people show up in power, how to transform that at a community level, and also to really develop strong peer support networks between gardeners, because these spaces are always being looked at by developers. So it's also about developing the kind of leadership that can protect the land, and keep it in community stewardship. And I'll pass it to Julian.
Yeah, just wanted to highlight some mutual aid organizing down here in Atlanta. So, like I said, I'm part of a bill fund called the Free Atlanta Abolition Movement, and we partner really closely with this organization of justice impacted folks, called Bar Business. And every year we do a Black Mama's Bailout on Mother's Day. We collect community resources and try to get as many Black mothers out of jail as we can. But it doesn't stop there, right? So that's the part of our work, contending with the carceral state. But we also have a stable house where we provide people housing indefinitely that we bail out. So it's not like we're not, kind of sustaining folks, and provide them job training and other skill building so that folks don't end up kind of ensnared in the carceral state in general. And yeah, this kind of work has a lot of elements of the solidarity economy. We do things cooperatively, and make collective decisions, and really support people in meeting their needs, and not just their needs, but their families' needs as well. So yeah, just wanted to share that example. I'll pass it to you.
And just for the sake of time, I may skip over this and say if you follow Cooperate Connecticut, subscribe to our newsletter. We just wrote a little story about the Naugatuck Valley Project and the Brookside Housing Cooperatives, which are another really powerful example here in Connecticut of people who've organized over the past few decades to create permanently affordable housing for multiple generations, and are fighting really hard to protect that from kind of being captured by the state and by capitalists, and to promote that model for other communities across Connecticut. So I just want to say a little bit about what now, folks. I understand, you may have to get going, but we'll make sure to send you this recording so you can miss anything if you have to leave. But I'll just quickly kind of try to get us to close. And if you have any questions before you leave, please write them in the chat, and we'll do our best to respond over email. So we may not have as much time. We'll stick around for a little bit to answer any questions you may have, but even if you have to get going, please write those questions in the chat, and we can make sure to try to respond to the best of our ability, or at least recommend some resources related to the things you're interested in learning more about. So thanks, Valeria, for those questions. So what now? So you may be like, this is all good and great, but what do I do with this information? I just want to plug the New Economy Coalition, and actually, Julian, can I invite you to say a little bit more about where people can learn more about NEC? And yeah, because there are people who are not in Connecticut here, and I want you to get to know what can you do, not just if you're here in Connecticut.
Sure, yeah. So like I said, the New Economy Coalition is a network of over 200 members across the country. So many of you will probably be able to find organizations that are doing some of this work nearby. And if you go to the link that was just dropped in the chat, that's our member directory. So you can look at our organizations by sector or by location. They got this really cool map. So I would encourage you to check that out and think about like whether you'd like to get involved or learn more about some of the organizations that are near you. We also have this resource library, and it has lots of learning materials, articles, videos. You can search on there. You can look through our tags or resource type. And yeah, this is a great kind of landing spot for learning materials for you to engage in more study of the solidarity economy movement.
Yeah, one of you just wrote in the chat, do you know of a coalition in Latin America or Central America? And it looks like this resource library might have something for you.
Yes.
But we'll definitely, again, respond more in our follow-up email. Yeah, I want to plug, again, we're doing a couple, we have more webinars coming up, y'all. So if you're whether you're in Connecticut or not, you can join us. So we have Co-op 101 coming up in June, Democratic Governance 101 in July, and then Black Cooperative Histories in August. So I hope to see you back here for one of our upcoming webinars.